Hi, 6th and 7th period. I am so sorry I am not there. As you know, I'm at this district training thing, but I wanted to make sure that we went through the reading check, chapter 2B, so you had the answers so you could use those to study and prepare for your first celebration of learning on Friday. So what I want you to do, hopefully you've gotten your reading check back. They were passed back by a few of you in your class. I want you to find a piece of the paper, a little white space, and I just want you to take 1 minute to sketch a very rough outline of the United States and then draw Texas in it. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute. You're just doing a quick mental mind map of the United States, the outline of our borders, and then go ahead and draw Texas in it. So I'll give you a few more seconds. Okay, hopefully you have finished up your little sketch, and we'll go back to that in a second. So we're just going to run through the PowerPoint, and it's just question by question, and I'll add some other details as we go along. The first question on the reading check: why does Blij call the body of water between Korea and Japan both the East Sea and the Sea of Japan? And of course, it's to avoid controversy, which you can find on pages 51 to 52. Remember, Blij talks about a Korean attendee to one of his discussions complaining that when he looked at Blij's book, the EC says the Sea of Japan, and the Koreans and the Japanese have a long history. They're not too fond of each other, and to the Koreans, that sea is certainly not the Sea of Japan. It's just the sea that is east of Korea. So it's interesting, next time you look at a map, see if it says Sea of Japan or EC. The big, huge wall map, the National Geographic map up in the classroom, it says Sea of Japan. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, question 2. Which career is not one of the 3 most important emerging and evolving fields according to the U.S. Department of Labor? It's D, petrotechnology. I totally made up that word, although I suspect it exists. The answer is on page 55, the second full paragraph. What I'm quizzing you on here is if you're reading along and you see something that says there's 3 of something or there's 2 of something, did you create a little list for yourself? Did you write down those things? And so that's kind of what I was looking for there. Question 3, interactive mapping is possible due mainly to this scientific advancement, and that is geographic information systems. The answer is on 55, the first full paragraph. Before we had any sort of technology, you had a paper map. You couldn't zoom in on anything. You couldn't click on an address and pull up a picture. You couldn't click on something and have more information about it. It was just a static paper flat map. So technology has allowed us, with geographic information systems, to create interactive maps. Like when you go to Google Maps, it lets you zoom in and click on things and find addresses. Esri is one of the big companies one of probably the biggest GIS company. And just for your information, and you should look at it, you can do some really cool things. They have a free online mapping tool. It's called ArcGIS, ARCGIS, and you can Google it and you can sign up for a free account and you can make your own maps. They've got layers that you can build on. You can link places, you can put drop a pin and have it linked to other places. I've done a few of them for us here at Kinder HSPVA, like for our professional development, and I haven't gotten really good at it, but I've always had a couple of students that really get into it and do these amazing maps. So I encourage you to try that in your free time, ArcGIS. Okay, question 4. Blij argues that by mapping systematically via technology, greater numbers of geographers are withdrawing from, quote, the real world. What does he mean by this? So in this type of question, I'm asking you to analyze something Blij wrote. I didn't ask you just to tell me what he wrote. I want to know what you think he means by it. And of course, the answer is C, the increased desire for geotechnology skills is pulling more geography students away from regional face-to-face geographical studies. The answer is on page 56. And what Blij means by this is geotech is interesting to students today. It's often very lucrative. A lot of oil and gas companies need people with geotech skills, especially GIS and mapping. A lot of businesses have their own GIS departments, actually, that can create maps for them for their research and things like that. And because of that, that's less students that are going into just regular regional face-to-face geographic studies, which can in some cases be more difficult because there's usually a language component needed for that. So you need to take several years of a foreign language. So that answer is on page 56. If you're interested in technology and interested in geography, I would highly encourage you to look into GIS. The big program here in Texas is at Texas State University. They have a big geography department. Okay, question 5. Is there ever any controversy over the naming of certain geographic locations? Yeah, because there's controversy about everything. The answer is on page 56 and 57. Lots of discussion over how you spell things. Is there an Ivory Coast in Africa? Well, that depends on who you ask, because the people that live in that area that we call the Ivory Coast would say no, because the name of their country is Côte d'Ivoire. It's the French, and it's not the English. So there is quite a bit of controversy over the naming of certain geographic locations. But fortunately for us, here with question 6, the United States Board of Geographic Names exists in order to help settle some of those controversies. So question 6 asks, the United States Board of Geographic Names is divided into how many standing committees? And the answer is 2, the foreign names and domestic names. It's on page 57, the first full paragraph. And if I were in class with you, I'd ask you why the United States gets to name everything in the world. Why is it us? So think about that for just 20 seconds while I sit here silently, awkwardly. Why would the U.S. be the one who gets to name those things? Well, it has a lot to do with our power. It also has to do with our relative wealth, and it has to do with our language. So the lingua franca of the world, the language that people speak when they don't speak the same language, which is the lingua franca of the world is English. So if there is a Chinese professor meeting a German science professor, they're going to speak in English. And because we are an English-speaking nation that has the resources to have a Board of Geographic Names, most of what our Board of Geographic Names puts out is adopted around the rest of the world. And it's just a matter of us having the money and the interest in having a government entity that sorts through all that stuff. So when they put out that foreign names bulletin, it's widely circulated, and most maps are based on that. Okay, question 7. According to Blij, what did the space race lead to that changed the picture in geography? That was a pun by Blij, changed the picture. We're talking about satellite pictures. So the answer to question 7 is D, fixed geosynchronous satellites. And what that means, geosynchronous, is that the satellite goes up into the Earth's orbit, but then it stays in one spot that is in sync with the rotation of the Earth. So the satellite can either stay in one spot and let the Earth spin around it, or it can follow around the Earth. Harper Hornclay had a good question today as I was going over this with them, and she said, well, what if another country doesn't want us to look at them? These satellites, these Landsat satellites, were developed for the military, and we can take a picture up in space that shows where there are people on the ground. It's that detailed. And what happens if you're a country that doesn't want us to look at them? Kind of too bad, right? We've got the satellite. So unless you shoot up our satellite in space, Space Force coming to you, it's there and we can see everything. So if you're one of our allies, we can share that information and we can share that capability. But if we don't like you, we don't share that image. Now, of course, Russia has their own satellites and it's getting pretty crowded up in orbit. But these geosynchronous satellites are why we're able to have Google Maps and Google Earth and all of that kind of stuff. So answer to that is on page 53 and 54. Question number 8. Blij says that the Nigerians are the Texans of Africa when it comes to drawing mental maps, and that's on page 58. So look at that little map I had you sketch and look at your Texas and see if on your map you could fit Oklahoma and then Kansas and then Nebraska and then South Dakota and North Dakota. Could you fit all of those states between where you drew Texas and your Canadian border? Some of you probably knew what I was doing here, but some of you may not, and you may realize that all of those other states are going to be pretty squished. So the Nigerians are the Texans of Africa when it comes to drawing mental maps. Question 9, which is a blank slide. Question 9. Do some people, according to Blij, seem to have better mental maps? Yes. Answer is found on page 58, the first paragraph. My dad was an air traffic controller. He has an excellent sense of direction, and like him, I almost always know which direction is north, and if I were standing in the classroom, I would be pointing kind of towards the temporary building, C11 and C9, and I'd say, that's north from where you're standing. Some people just seem to be able to do this more intuitively. I always can put a map of Houston in my brain and figure out which direction I'm going. My mom and my brother, who makes a lot of money, is a very excellent attorney. Not so much. Their mental maps and their ability to navigate them are different than my dad and mine. So think about your family. You perhaps have parents who look at a map once and that's all they need, and you may have other parents that absolutely rely on their GPS systems. Question 10. Where did Dr. Snow prove the link between water pumps and cholera? In London. The answer is on page 61 or page 60, first full paragraph. First time that a map was kind of used to problem solve an issue rather than just to navigate. And you're going to watch a TED Talk about that when we're done with this. Question 11. Dr. Snow's map would be considered which of the following? Epidemiological. It is a map that traces the spread of disease, and that is what epidemiology is. It's the study of the spread of disease. That answer can be found on the map or on page 61 in the first paragraph or in that map, figure 2.5. Okay. Question 12. Who created a map that suggested the Earth's continental landmasses were once one large landmass? That is Wegener. The answer is on page 62 or 63, figure 2.6. Look at a globe, look at the map up on the wall. You can kind of see how South America would fit into Africa like a puzzle. Okay, the eastern seaboard, the eastern coast of the United States, you could see how you could slide that down and to the right, and that would fit kind of on the western top of Africa. Not only do the puzzle pieces fit, now we have fossil evidence. We know that there's similar fossils. We know that the geology is the same, so like the same type of rocks can be found in those places that probably broke apart. So we have a lot of evidence to support that theory, which is technically still a theory. Now, Wegener got the idea of a supercontinent, Pangea. He got that correct, but he didn't get correct the method. He didn't understand how it happened. Today, we know, we theorize, it's still technically a theory, but most scientists agree that that happens because of plate tectonics and subduction and convection and all of that stuff. Okay. Question 13, what was that landmass called? It is Pangea. That answer is on page 63 or 64, or also figure 2.6. Question 14, Blij provides examples of places that created maps of bad intentions. Which two countries does he mention? Now, this is kind of one of those AP best choice questions. The answers are Germany and Japan. On page 65, first two paragraphs. Now, he does later talk about China. He does later on the next page talk about China. But at that point, he's already starting to talk about cartographic aggression. So the best answer when you are given 2 out of 4 to pick would have been Germany and Japan. Okay, question 15. Blij argues that when governments start issuing maps that include the territory of neighbors, these countries are committing an act of cartographic aggression, and that is on page 66, first paragraph, and we talked a lot about that last class. Okay,